UFT side, so they've had a really darn good season heading up to this point, even taking down the number 4 team of Robert Morris. And then TMU had about the same story, 3-2. One of their losses coming actually against UFT in a 2-1 series, where they took that loss, obviously 1-2. And then they took down Kettering Varsity, which is another really impressive team to knock off heading into that first round, that quarterfinal stage of playoffs. But for UFT's roster, it's Taro, Nick, Sleepy, Sergio, and GP2 rounding out their rosters for this champion side. And then for TMU, well, both of these teams have so many darn players. It's a big question about who it's going to be, because I know they're talking about switching some people in and out here between the maps. But for the first map, it's Osprosis, Naj, Jogorku, or Jogorku, I think is the way it's pronounced, Mr. Turbo, and Actually.
Yeah, I mean, even then, just look at the roster screen. I mean, especially on the side of UFT, good Lord Almighty, it is an it's basically a spreadsheet in its own right. Like, it's like 2 MLB rosters, if it's what we're really looking at. But all things considered, regardless, we're looking at esports. Obviously, things are going to be comprised down to a certain degree, and even more so, you get a lot of kind of contingencies when it comes around to the collegiate scene. But all things considered, knowing these two teams, we already got the rosters in play, but what are the maps? That's the most important thing, because obviously that's where we actually get specializations that come into play in agent selections or operators. Excuse me.
Not just me! Not just me!
That's the big thing and topic of conversation. Consider that we are going to be starting things off with the cafe. Then we're moving on over to chalet, and if we do need it, that last map will be skyscraper. So a little bit of an enjoyable kind of setup here for me is cafe does have that border.
It's not cafe.
On it, but
not cafe.
we do know chalet. That one's lined up. Skyscraper's there too. And well, honestly, it's cafe. It's been the game for ages. We all know what it looks like.
How are we going to see this map go down, Dallas? I'll tell you, they're going to go up to the rooftop on the attacking side, and they're going to worm their way downwards. And we'll only see a very, I guess, one-dimensional approach, a very flat approach when it comes to that first floor take, if we're seeing a kitchen hold under the defense, which a lot of teams actually in recent memory haven't been going for necessarily as their second or even their third choice objective. I've seen teams opting to go for library and mining half the time now, which is pretty interesting for the map of cafe. At least something new. This was for a very long time my least favorite map in all of R6. Now it's lapsed because I can't see anything on that map because it's all the same, just dull tone of gray every single location around those corners. It's just absolutely awful. But we can take a look at our operator veto phase, or the operator ban phase, stepping up into this, and you'd kind of expect this to be somewhat standard. I know Flores can get banned pretty heavily on this map because you don't really want to have to deal with that pixel control up on the, is that technically, yeah, the third floor technically is what it is for this map, since there's 3 stories. You don't want to have to deal with pixel over in the third floor. You don't want to have to deal with players inside piano in the first place. You want to kind of flush players out of cocktail lounge over in C1 and C2. So you'll see Flores get knocked off. Dokubi's just an always ban right now. It's hard to really harp on that. And then for the second, I don't know, you could kind of throw, you know, something into this. You could go kind of cheeky that Shields just got another rework today, or I think that release day, I believe it's released today for the season 9.1.1 or something like that. I don't remember, where your knee actually sticks behind the shield, and we saw 3 different shield bans last weekend. This does make sense. It's Ying.
I will say a lot of my context is me coming from ranked play. So I mean, obviously you do have the kind of the 2 opposite ends of the coin. You can always guess to be like, oh, these guys are just gonna ban Jackal on the attacking side because people hate getting detected. I do like seeing the competitive side of things, and obviously looking at the R6 Invitational that recently concluded. Obviously, Brazilians play a lot different from Americans, but still, nonetheless, the kind of general idea is still there. But the wild thing really just comes down to really the execution, the preferences of these players. Dokubi, I was expecting, just because, I mean, just going ahead and tracking everybody and using those autos for a little bit just feels really good. Ying going ahead and finding a way to just kind of knock all those flashes out of the way a little bit if you're on the defensive side, and hate the fact that you can just be absolutely flushed out from it. The Valkyrie's a little bit crazy in its own right, and the Izami, even then with these recent nerfs that came through, obviously being able to now shoot her shield down, it's still kind of insane to some degree, where you're saying it's still a massive nuisance with how much bullets it really takes.
Yeah, a mag and a half. Who wants to sit there for so long screaming your location, your exact position, trying to knock down a Kiva barricade? It's not worth the time. It's not worth the effort. So seeing teams opt to ban out Izami isn't that shocking. But what is shocking is seeing Finmir actually escape through the defensive operator ban phase, and that's an operator that you see banned pretty much every single game without fail. It is a guarantee. And yes, Valkyrie is exceptionally powerful on this map. Cafe has 3 stories of winding corridors and tight angles. Those black eye cams can find you a lot of information. They can catch you out nearly any mistakes that an attacking team can make in regards to not checking these corners for where these cameras could be placed, and give you the information you're really looking for in the defense. But you know who else can do that? Solus, right? You have other operators on the defensive side that give you active information. You don't have to rely on the Valkyrie, just kind of accept that it's going to be there. Get Fenrir out of the board because he's just too darn powerful with these Dreadnought mines.
I mean, Fenrir, obviously, I mean, Valkyrie's more of a universally applicable kind of operator. You can use her anywhere on the map. You can get those cams and nooks and crannies and get, obviously, information, but those have to be kind of executed to a certain degree. They have to rely on the calls. They have to get that kind of transition of the thought process behind it to actually get the calls to go off, for teammates to register it, and even then to still execute off of that kind of relative information being given. Meanwhile, Fenrir, everything is on site. It's comprised of that singular area, and even then more so, it just activates itself with the audible, letting everybody know. So it's less steps. So it's just crazy to see it made it play through, but even then still, it's going to be an obvious pick coming out. And I'd love to see how these teams can integrate it. We haven't seen the nerfs for it just yet, but that is going to cue that Twitch to be coming into play here, which hasn't really been picked off yet.
Where's the call out here? Attacking side, you've broken the mirror window. It's breached. You have so many abilities at this point. You brought the agents, or the operator, sorry, to do so, and you're not aware that it's already been broken open. It just seems like a big miscommunication that's allowed two players enough the side of TMU to open up for 2 frags apiece, actually, in Mr. Turbo, the individuals to do so. The SMG-11 picking apart one at distance through the mirror window, and then actually who's been kind of roaming around on the first floor, initially inside bakery, then through small bakery, now holding off towards bar. This is a really tough time for UFT to try to come back in from. They realize there's possibly a player up on top of wide stairs. However, that is not the case, as instead Jagorku is upstairs still using that Solus to try to gather information to hopefully relay that off towards Actually, who is already looking to get their second kill of this round, sitting just outside big window right next to main entrance, and really looking to hold down that VIP side, because UFT are going to have to pretty much blindly enter into this space if they want to try to take control here off towards this garage side. But wow, what a shot from Taro, and Nash just kind of overstays their welcome in the 416C.
Yeah, just go ahead and get things started off well. I mean, obviously, we're looking at a little bit of rotation coming up from the defensive side. They've already went ahead, knocked out those initial players, and even they're still creating that massive solid, getting all that damage off initially before they've even really entered the building. We didn't see that verticality coming to as much play as we typically see on this map, as we're already still and see that Jagorku is just kind of moving about, looking to go ahead and lock that thing down, knowing that Soul's they create enough of a scare to actually kind of alleviate the detention. But already when you do see somewhat of a breach coming in through, you see that fridge opening up a little bit, you know this bottom floor is just going to be exposed at some point. You're waiting for something to go off, and that Fenrir strap, that's going to be the exact thing you're looking for. Information given, a swing not really executed off the back, but you know where everybody else can be playing for these trades, and mounting yourself one more.
Taro put down the Claymore, but just didn't realize that Jagorku was staying a little further down the stairwell than they necessarily anticipated. It's a refrag back, but in the same fell swoop, TMU escape with yet another kill following in Mr. Turbo's footsteps. It's a 1v3, and Doki, not the Doki, but a Doki, that's for sure, is left all alone. And yeah, when they get that freezer opened up, you maybe expect that to be the #1 angle they try to move in from. There's SMG-11s, there's Mossbergs, there's SMGs at the waiting for TMU defensively, and that will knock UFT's attempts at taking this first round 1-0 back the other direction. As I had mentioned earlier, you don't typically see Kitchen as a primary, even as a tertiary choice. They picked it first, and they rightfully do so successfully with a first round win.
Go ahead and lock things down. Make sure to kind of lock down that bottom area, because that's where you kind of get isolated. When it comes to the top floors, you have a little bit more of an actual ceiling to work with. You have some breathing room. You have the nice sun to let you know that, okay, there is some expose that is available to us. But even when you're down there in the basement, you were just literally in the trenches. You were completely cornering yourself to a certain degree. And when you can go ahead and put your team off that site, you want to make sure to kind of keep the big picture really brought into each other. So already seeing this transition now to these upper levels, it's the same kind of situation. Looking at these kind of different floors now coming to play. We're looking at these teams using those higher and lower elevations and looking to kind of really diversify what they're trying to hit, and even then kind of really forcing an adaptation to come through from TMU to kind of really change things up. But better yet for UFT, show that some verticality may actually be an option now. You need to really kind of decide that this can't be one-dimensional. This can't be three-dimensional. It's got to come from literally everywhere where you're throwing the Z-axis in as well.
This ping is the server accidentally switch on when they rehosted the lobby, I guess.
Who knows? These teams are basically a couple minutes away from each other.
Yeah, they're what, a mile away from each other? I mean, and so much, I mean, equally, the ping's gonna be trash, right?
Yeah.
So you could argue that there's some level of equality here, but at the same time, it's probably not that enjoyable of an experience to be playing at 158 to 220 ping on average between y'all. Kind of awkward, and you'd have to have a full rehost as well, so you'd have to figure it out. Either way, this round would be live since no rehost was requested by the time the prep phase has ended, which is, I believe, the rule set we have here for R6. There's so many rules. It's hard to keep up even as a caster, but 30 seconds without damage. That's what we're being told from our prop booth, which also makes sense. That is typically what it is for most leagues. Plane will be placed outside on the bakery rooftop to try to make sure that no one from the side of TMU can initiate a run out to try to get a kill from a player repelling. This is where I was talking about. You head up to the rooftop, work him through these hatches, and try to clear out that top floor first and foremost. Defensively, TMU know that they don't have to pick this objective as their primary. Using have their secondary, obviously so, because you'll play the second floor objectives almost the same exact way. They'll extend up to the top floor. They won't play as heavy. It gives them a fallback plan, a lot like you would see on our second map when we come up to that one fairly shortly after this map ends. We'll see kitchen and dining be the kind of fallback objective when you play that and you extend up to the second floors if you're holding master bedroom and dining, or sorry, master bedroom and off.
Just go ahead, play that third floor, deny any kind of entry that comes through for these attackers' eyes, and let the utility do all the work for you. I mean, just go ahead. Anything that goes on site, you're going to hear those mines, you're going to hear those mines go off, you're going to hear everything, really just going to give you the information that's necessary, which doesn't even require really any of attention, because you know that everything's going to be going off. You can just work with your squad there. You can shoot through those floorboards the same exact way as you would on the attacking side, so it's really not that big of a deal. But what we're already seeing coming our way is going to be the likes of TMU players that decide to still allocate on site. And I think it makes reasonable sense when you do see kind of those dudes coming to play every here and there. You do see these castles every now and again kind of want to work off that. But it really comes down to the gun differentials and making sure with these ACOGs coming back into play for all these defenders to make sure that you put those guys in the fragging spot.
Sergio opens up this round for the first blood for UFT. They've mostly cleared out this third floor successfully, Dallas, and Turbo's not in the best of spots. There's a hatch not far behind them in C2 that they get up to step back towards, and I think they will do so. The Mossberg is in hand to allow them to drop through laundry. But the pressure that's being brought forward and unfurled from UFT is a little bit too much for Turbo, and really the rest of TMU, it seems, to overcome. 3 players gone off the board, and within a 10-second span, that's near irrecoverable. If it wasn't for the fact that Sleepin' had already had a huge lick of damage taken against them, and Taro had already been knocked off the board at that point in time. Double man disadvantage is quite hard to come back from, but when you can get isolated kills like this to Doki and you can get some damage off towards Sergio, you can maybe hope and pray that there's still something available for you defensively for Natch, who's taking a huge amount of pressure in through Train, and nobody is pushing them to go for the plant. They wanted the kill. You can't trust this player to go one-on-one. You've got to get the plant down. It is a round that should have gone to UFT, but they just failed to realize the objective's the most important thing.
Even then, I mean, you look at a couple more of these teammates, make sure they're going to clear things out, not go too crazy, because you do have that third member over to the side, taking a spike out of their heel. So, I mean, there's just so much kind of going on in that situation to where you're kind of at the point where it's not even about those last couple seconds. It's about the setup towards it. You're looking at these 20-second margins now saying, okay, we're surrounding the site, but we got to be pressing W. Sure, we don't want to run anything all willy-nilly, but we do need to make sure to actually get yourself in those circumstances.
It's so much easier for an attacking team to put pressure off in that direction, which could make me believe they wouldn't want to play that objective as their go-to here and would like to throw themselves back up to the third floor, which I would argue would probably be my go-to objective of choice, considering that defenders now have so much more potential with those ACOGs, with the larger sites down inside C2. Doc's gonna have even more importance, and yet we just don't see that really being brought forward by TMU. They're playing a lot more expressive on the roam game on these extensions, and it's catching UFT off guard, yeah, but only in the first round. Of the second round, they tore through it like it was wet paper, and looks to be they're gonna try to go for the exact same thing. They're gonna stick over, just one objective slightly shifted, and go fireplace and reading instead.
It's the right read. I mean, already you do have so much range when it comes down to it. You're just going to have singular players kind of being cornered. And I think, honestly, the biggest players you're looking at in these kind of situations are going to be those Wamais, because, I mean, they are now kind of... Wamai is, honestly, weirdly enough, at least from the perspective of me, I mean, you can tell me I'm wrong, he kind of feels like the new Warden to a certain degree, because of that kind of roaming player, that absolute cornerstone fragger, knowing that MP5 just has such easy recoil to deal with. Now having the ACOG back in play, and sure, if you don't have really flashes kind of covering yourself, and you can't just completely alleviate them off the get-go just in a second's notice, but you can at least give yourself so much heads-up time with a massive net that says, okay, if somebody is flooding me out here, they're not going to want to push me, A, because I'm just delaying their own throwables towards themselves, but B, I also just kind of, I can set up for it. I can take those fights better than they can, quite frankly, just because I'm already holding this angle. So looking at, I mean, relying on that player, seeing what they can do, putting them in these fraggable positions, as I mentioned, and even then looking out the rest of the team, setting up on the surf floor in the exact same way that we would expect, you're looking at these long lineups. You're looking at that white hall. You're looking towards this piano room, looking for those open spaces where you've got so much breathing room. Open these real fraggers, these absolute units can start to excel.
White hall is going to be probably the most important thing here for UFT to, I would say, utilize effectively, especially off that repel game. Keep a player outside of supply, outside of bathroom. Try to put pressure in towards freezer directly. The C2 seemingly is a lost cause for most teams when it comes to a direct pressure. Yes, you can get a slight sight line in from that top skylight, but you want to deny players from playing, you know, apex positions like Mr. Choba, who's right here towards Pixel, where typically you'd have a shield in front of that Pixel side, and that would be your primary point of concern. Defensively, they didn't even opt to bring a shield. If you have the Rotero drones, it's a pretty easy way to counteract that, and, you know, not banning out the Flores would mean that it's not really an end-all be-all to play total denial of that Pixel door. So you would just say, hey, shield's not even necessary. Let's go with a little bit longer sightlines and sit inside supply first and foremost. And I would say if that drone's not a concern, the big one's going to be Ram. It's going to be coming out here with the absolute just floor destruction utility. And that's why I think we're seeing TMU play so darn heavy up on this extension. You typically see 2, maybe 3 sometimes, and you'd have them kind of extending a little bit farther forward. They're playing super far back inside Whitehall. They're going to look to have all 3 players drop through that laundry hatch because they want to take total denial of UFT here, and they're doing so well. Nash opens up for a first blood. Yes, Jagorku gets one right afterwards, and then Turbo would actually go down, but it's still TMU coming up with the positive kills here as Osbrosis still behind in C2 deals with yet another, and it's not done yet for the woes of UFT. It's just sleeping. Has to take a direct approach down through museum entrance, in through mining. Will they spot the player first? They don't. They get some damage off, but it's both players trying for this firefight. Can the pistol for sleeping do something? Maybe just, but Nash is refusing to go down. What is going on here, brother?
Oh, it is something different. I gotta say, I've never seen a longer fight in R6 in my entire life, but still, nonetheless, you know that it was going to be working into a 1v3 situation where you're saying, let me toy around with the guy for a second. I mean, we're just biding time here, quite frankly. But I mean, it was still expected nonetheless, but I mean, as the entire round even started, and even then when you see that initial pick, it already going ahead and knocking off Ram was worst case situation for UFT. That was where we were putting a lot of our marbles into, quite frankly, was at least getting those drones down, kind of moving through those floors, and then making sure to open up the sightlines for the rest of the team. Those being knocked off right from the get-go, it's going to be a huge problem, because even then, we really complimented UFT's breach on that top floor right from the start. We saw the way they were able to execute. We found the initial kills that they were finding, and even then, with not much really of a change, they said, honestly, we have a little bit more of a luxury here. We can play that kind of same style again and hopefully win these rounds, but TMU just there, ready with the adjustment, saying it happened once, we can just do it again. And even then, they're probably going to kind of get a lot more lenient of how they want to make that approach, because they got to set up for something different.
So the prep phase, they want the rehost. Second rehost to the game. Yippee! Yippee! Welcome back to R6 Dallas. It is truly the esports, right?
I've been playing.
And welcome back, everybody, to the UFT TMU massacre, because apparently it's 3-0 already. We're headed around 4. And it has not been too good of a showcase for UFT. They're more than capable enough. Let's just say that straight out, right? They are more than capable enough of taking down this opposing side. But let's also remember that UFT is the team that beat TMU last time they faced in week 4. What has happened in the last 4 weeks that has now led TMU to a total landslide victory so far on the defense?
Is it really that bad? From like perspective, like I
1-3
know a
was
3-0 in Valorant. It's for me. I'm like, oh yeah, oh this is bad. I think, I mean, is that usually how this kind of goes though? Like it's one team starts
round 6-0 start in Val, right? It's a 6-0 start.
Oh,
that's its
because
comparison.
I feel like teams always look stronger on defense, at least for a couple rounds. So you swap it. It's the same exact situation.
The issue is, how do you view Cafe? Because collegiately, Cafe tends to be a little bit more attacker favored in recent memory. So me seeing this thing already go downhill.
I'm watching Brazilians.
That's true. You're watching a lot of Brazil. To me, it screams that UFT need to make some micro adjustments. Obviously, round 2, I'm not going to count really against them. You could classify this really as a 2-1 game, which is definitely more manageable. But the third round and the first round were so collectively strong for TMU that I don't know where UFT are going to have to try to recover from. We're down to the kitchen as well, where we saw the most dominant round come out from TMU.
Yeah.
This means that there's a good shot for a 4-0 start unless UFT change up the strategy entirely, which I think is the craziest part, because their biggest success story of that round was them clearing that mirror window and getting control of Bakery fairly well before they let Ashley and Turbo get 2 kills. Where is that now? There's no mirror window, which means half the strategy bringing this twitch and clearing out that utility and trying to give yourself a really solid foothold in Bakery is going to be absent and missing as smoke canisters get tossed out to try and cut off sight lines. And actually, I believe this Jagorku are going to have to play a lot more. No, it's Turbo. Going to play a lot more aggressive as Jagorku and small Bakery floats out towards the window and down goes Toki. What in the world? It's a start already for TMU.
These first bloods, man. I mean, last time it was the Nomad when we saw, and it was by the hands of obviously by a Fenrir and that looming presence that existed, but we saw 2 players drop outside that Bakery door kind of almost immediately. And that was the biggest thing. I was saying, okay, surely this is what they would make an adaptation for. Something they change, at least come from a different angle, kind of put that pressure somewhere else. Still have some players looming about, but they are just funneling in through here, losing everybody in the process. No dispersal of resources whatsoever. It is purely just going through a funnel. It is fish in a barrel, and it's only so little HP remaining on top of this Twitch that, quite frankly, you can count on the round at this point, unless, well, go ham. But I mean, a 1v3 especially.
It's a 1-bullet game.
It is. It is. I know, man.
Anything can happen in a 1-bullet game. But you are asking a whole lot, especially another tactical timeout. Actually, this one's not
entire body's 1 bullet, though.
Yeah, this is true. It's a body shot, one bullet. It's a toe shot, 1-bullet game right now. UFT, yeah, I mean, your little tangent there was absolutely 100% correct. It's not even right to call it a tangent. It's a rant about what we're seeing coming out from the attack UFT. It's just way too one-dimensional. It's too flat, too static, and that just cannot be something that is allowed for a team that can gun with TMU, as we saw in round 2 and round 3. At least a better performance-wise in round 3. Where is it? Why are we coming in for there? Where you had one person pressuring towards small Bakery, yeah, but where's the garage pressure? In round 1, you lost 2 players in Bakery, and everyone else proceeded to transition over towards the garage side. Maybe if we see it transition earlier, and you have a double-pronged push, but you'd have 2, maybe 3 players pressure Bakery, you would see the defense of TMU spread out these players that are locking down Bakery, and they'd be less of a concern. And you could hope to cut off instead of actually just trying to play into the strengths of these operators up close and personal, as there's the second floor control, where you would then question, hey, why don't we go to the 3rd floor and work down like we have previously? And I don't know, I just feel like time is something that's really hankering in the back mind of UFT. They faced it in round 2 and lost to it, and now I guess they don't want to face the same woes, and they just face a different woe, that being the SMGs in TMU's hands.
I mean, now you get to a point of a spiral, right? I mean, where things have already kind of worked out. Even then, I mean, second time is hitting even harder than the first. I mean, we saw this with the 2 second floor points that we just saw on the defensive end, kind of in that first rotation of the sites, where the first time when they were going for that terrain execute, they said, okay, things are looking pretty good on the 3rd floor. Go to the second time around, it gets even worse. Then we see that first round where everything kind of at least had a chance to happen from the side of UFT. Now we get the second roundabout, and it just looks worse. I mean, it's this point to where you would expect the opposite effect, realistically. You're trying to go ahead and kind of dig yourself out of this hole, figure some things out, say what worked better, and even then we could go ahead and take our attention immediately as you and I, obviously with a little bit of a benefit of being able to see the entire map, saying, okay, that garage push worked a little better. You at least found a breach. You at least touched the site. And what didn't work? Bakery. As a team, you're expecting the same exact kind of communication to be going on between each other, especially when you have a lot more experience of being in the game and kind of understanding what fights you could have taken and what you couldn't. And quite frankly, let's be real, the Bakery one that looked like it never even had a shot in the first place, but now being revisited and now seeing yourself right back into the situation where you're going on to having to take this 3rd floor, to your benefit, it actually is on the 3rd floor, but if you couldn't even find the initial hold initially to find that 2nd floor hit to work vertically off of, how are you going to expect to just get it outright from that massive window that's open in the top? Because, well, that's, once again, a big funnel, just like we see on Bakery. If not easier to trap somebody off of, because you have way more angles that you can get shot from.
Yeah, verticality is so important defensively, especially when Solus was allowed through the van phase, right? It's too big of an importance. It's too consistent of a factor to allow through most of the time. And if you know it is through, you go to shut it down, right? You move in to alleviate the concern. Nash has had a pretty darn good game. We obviously saw them clutch up round 3 in the 1v1, which is a very entertaining 1v1 for sure. And we've seen, you know, pretty good economy coming out from TMU when they get success and when they don't find success. They lose one side, but the other side holds strong. And I think that's a very important thing for a defending team to have. But it also is something that can be really, I would say, strung out for an attacking side. If you know they're really strong defending one side and they're a little bit weaker on the other, why would you continue to poke the pointy side of a knife, right? It's just not the wisest idea. Try to go somewhere else that's not going to poke you in the rear so hard, and just a little bit smarter. We see for the first time now up to the 3rd floor coming out for TMU. They've opted not to go down to the 2nd, which is maybe the right idea. See something a little bit different, maybe hoping that UFT has started to realize some of the success they've seen and can now have to get a spanner thrown in the works or a wrench thrown in things if you're actually American, and say, hey, this is something you haven't seen yet. Test the waters here. We're going to do what we can as they send out the E1E and also have the players on the rappel hunting for any and all information of players inside Cocktail, and there's one inside Freezer Hall.
Just going ahead and looking for anything to be given up here by these defenders, and quite frankly, I mean, obviously, you're not going to be giving any of that up. You do see a little bit of 2nd floor control already being taken over by UFT, so they get some information there to understand that we do have some roaming capability here. They probably went ahead, put that Solus up, so we're not really having to concern ourselves too much with that. So, I mean, this is doable, but even then, that's because you're running outright utility, just gets right in the face of these opposition and can really just kind of go ahead and cut things off. That's the biggest sacrifice we see with that Valkyrie being out of the game now, is that you can play a little bit more aggressive. You're not really working for anything here. You're not playing off cameras as much. You're using your face. You're using your scopes, the things that can actually shoot at people. And we saw that on the defense for the majority of these rounds. You don't meet them on their entry. This may be where TMU can start to falter.
TMU have that shield placed over in Pixel. I highlighted the successes and woes of this previously, and they're starting to see a lot more success off that individual position purely of the fact that there is no Rotero drone to really knock that down, and any nades or anything of the sort would hopefully be eaten by the ADS that'll be placed behind couch. It'll make it a lot easier to deal with that utility. We're not seeing enough being burnt that way for UFT, and the ADSs can reset, which would be even bigger problems. Dragorku inside Cigar may just have the perfect angle for 2. Rinses both of them and evens up this series as the Thorn Nade also takes down one. Osprosis, shockingly enough, getting their name on the board in the afterlife. Now just Turbo remaining in a 1v2, very manageable in the final 35 seconds. 2 players stepping forward. The SMG-11 not going to do too much at that distance. Turbo will need to play quite smart here. Angle needs to be a lot tighter. We'll have a good variation of a good sight line off from inside Freezer, but it's going to be that new balcony that's going to be the biggest problem child for them, as Taro knows exactly where Turbo lies in wait and will now lie in the afterlife. A successful attacking round finally coming forward on an objective that TMU maybe should have opted not to head to, considering it's the only objective they've now lost.
Exactly. I mean, that was the biggest thing already, was expecting that, just kind of getting onto that 3rd floor. But it's an all or nothing approach for the likes of UFT, where they're just going to allocate everything to the 3rd floor. So we're not really concerned about when finding that 2nd floor or getting control in the first place, because it's much more difficult to hold it from the bottom than it is over. So considering that you do see that now it's kind of 2nd attempt going through this kind of 2nd roundabout now, and that just doesn't work out for them, you're seeing UTM get in that 2nd floor, that Buck finding 2 kills to just start everything off, and you're saying, well, they're giving up this area of the map. Over and over and over again on those entries, TMU didn't even let UFT, even really get inside, quite frankly. They were holding them outdoors. They weren't defending in sight. They were defending the entire building and still doing that. It's super efficient, almost flawlessly to a certain degree of how it felt in terms of the actual breaches that were taking place. So given that 3rd up, there's no way you do that again. You're leaving that alone. You're playing the aggression game once more. You're not really concerning yourself with anything. You're relying on that Solus. You're getting that information. Understand that Valkyrie's out of the game, so you're pushing those scopes into their sight lines before they can really react.
It felt like in round 1, we saw TMU win out on the extension. Their roam game was a bit more successful than UFT's roam clear, and I feel like that's why we saw a lot of success from them in that round. Round 2 was where UFT absolutely tore apart TMU's extension. Just a disgusting display of how it means to clear out a roam game in an extension up to that 3rd floor. Past that, round 3, fairly even, TMU getting the better end. Round 4, TMU most definitely getting the better end purely off of Bakery's hold. And then this last round, Where did we see so much of the success come from UFT? Clearing out those roam games, clearing out the players on the second floor that are trying to play that, you know, lower verticality, but the verticality still nonetheless. It gives them that little bit of an edge, and it's just something to drill home against TMU, where it looks like they falter when the going gets tough and they, you know, have to get a little bit tougher. And that's going to be something that'll be a little bit more important now heading into round 6. Best case scenario for UFT, they exit into the second half 2-4. TMU, though, they want to make sure they pop in that 5, because if Cafe does tend to be a defender-sided side for this team, for this roster, they need as much leeway as possible, because we've seen what happens when scorelines get a little bit more distraught, a little bit more static. It's going to be something that's hard to go for us. There's no way you get out of that alive. Thankfully, Jagorku is there as well to save their teammate of Nash, who had Sergio pressuring from inside, and then Nick's Doc out on the outside bakery roof. What is going on? UFT should not have given up that kill.
Just a Guardian Angel playing here. I mean, already you look at the likes of once more UFT just playing towards the outside, not really able to aggress on these angles just yet because you're playing off that recon. You're playing off these angles. You're looking to still kind of concern yourself with that top floor, which is still just have not really been touched. Look at everybody else around that. Hold on to that second floor. That's where UFT's attention is going towards. And once again, we can talk about that roam game. They haven't really dispersed themselves out to enough of a degree where they can get a better idea of how this map is playing out so far. So once again, because of this alone, we're seeing numbers go in the direct favor of TMU until finally we see at least one player knocked off. But I mean, still, they're okay with these fights because it's a 4v1 and this one looks as good as done. Sure, it's a one bullet game, but it's also really takes one player to get that done, and it's Mr. Turbo once more.
The SMG-11, they even pre-fired the angle. It's another stance where we see UFT Dallas just one-dimensional. Why are they sending 4 players down Whitehall? Where's the player stepping through Cigar? Where's the player stepping into Bar and trying to contest the other direction? Where's the drone work into Cocktail to give that secondary angle of the player stepping through Cigar and into Bar? Where's the drone work to make sure they're safe? Where is all of that for UFT? And it's gone. It's not there. It's absent. And now TMU are stepping into this and saying, well, we just thrashed a good first half. We just need 2 more, baby. We just got to get a couple more success stories to our name. We need UFT to make 2 major mistakes. And considering we've seen UFT make a lot of mistakes, I think it's a very big possibility. And I guess you just have to play and hope that maybe Cafe isn't going to be your map if you're UFT, or maybe you're really hoping that the defending side for you is going to be a success story, because this map was picked by UFT, which makes me kind of worried that this map isn't going their way, or makes me kind of concerned that this is where UFT have a huge comeback story and absolutely give it to TMU for the remainder of this map.
Oh, I don't know about that. I was gonna say optimistic.
There you go.
They lock in, because
that's what I'm looking for. I'm not worried about the recovery. I'm worried about the failure, the shortcoming. I'm optimistic.
Already, I gotta say, I mean, a big thing starting these rounds off. Composition. I mean, it's extremely important. Not even worrying about the Twitch, not even worrying about the different mines that are about the map, not even really worried about the kind of other stuff that's gonna be present. You're saying we're just gonna cut it all off. Don't worry about Twitch, don't worry about destroying it. Let's just gonna keep it there. Work in our favor. Let's get the Brava, the Iana. We don't need to worry about drone work when we have a physical human there able to throw out decoys of myself that can clear things off the back of it, where it essentially always feels like a trade. I think, honestly, TMU, if there's a reason they win this round successfully, it already starts off with the ideology and obviously a first blood as well.
Yeah, I think the first blood tends to help out a little bit. I don't know why Sergio is playing so hyper-aggressive. They're going 0-3 at that point. They're not being the fragging player.
Oh, come on.
You pass the rock to your best killer, right? Like, that's what you do. If you've got a player going 9-3 at halftime, you don't go, okay, let's now put them on a static roll in the background, right? You lock them in. You give them the best possible operator to go out and get those kills and play that roam game. Sergio hasn't shown that ability just yet. And there's cold games, there's off games. Giving them this Ella just feels like a big misnomer for UFT, as they're now down a player, and look how much utility is being yoinked from TMU with this clutch
birthday,
drone.
Dude.
This clutch drone has just 8 and all you can eat buffet.
This is TMU's site now. I hate to break it to you.
You're in their objective. The only thing they're missing now is to toss the next clutch drone off into piano instead and just take cocktails. There's nothing there to hold this for UFT.
Drastically different. I mean, obviously, when it came around to the third floor, TMU didn't really do all that great in defending it themselves. I mean, this could just be a universal weakness between these two rosters, but regardless, considering that, looking at what's going on here, it was that difference, as I mentioned, the difference in ideology, using this site as an advantage rather than just trying to hit it from one spot. And already from the one spot, we addressed that was a very big problem. But still, even then, spreading things out, understand that you can take this a little more slow, allow this drone work, this reconnaissance, not only to just go ahead and give you information, but to give you presence, to give you threats scattered about the map. And we've seen TMU use that to such a degree to where now that we want to go for that hit, they can do it at different angles because the site is working in their favor.
Here's where the callouts have to be made. Smart one being made by Actually to turn over off away from New Balk and deal with Taro. And Doki was sitting inside Freezer Hall, kind of, testing the waters between Whitehall and Freezer side. Eventually does get dealt with as well. There's not really anywhere to transition to from that position. They gave up Cocktail C2, even C3 side of it, closer towards that hatch. They gave that up really quickly, which just let TMU's assault just continue to burn away. Obviously, there's no longer a big concern about utility. It's just, active utility needed to be used by UFT, and there wasn't really any more remaining. It was just the passive stuff that was no longer there. It's just that's about as good as a display of you can ask for that third floor. And UFT, despite the obstacles and the trials and tribulations they just faced, say, we still want this third floor. And I don't necessarily hate on this. Most teams don't like to play the kitchen side as their go-to objective, like we saw TMU do as their first in on their fourth. Most teams don't like to say, hey, we want to play for an opposing site and we want to play second floor so heavily. Both sides of the second floor objectives. We don't want to do so. UFT are playing this normally, and I think TMU is just really darn good about understanding this third floor attacking wise, and we obviously saw the weaknesses defensively, but that's shocking to see them so good on the attack here and then struggle defending it. Maybe just UFT are good at attacking this third floor, I'm not sure, because right now they're going to need a really big recovery for this, and maybe the start they're hunting for here is going to be changing up Doki's role here as well as changing up Sergio's role. Yeah, you'll still extend probably with that Legion Dallas, and Doki can still play a lot farther back, just less information because there's not a Solus and a little bit more reliant on that range and also the battle of attrition by having those dock stems be available for the roster.
Don't see too much of an actual exchange or at least switch up transition for the likes of TMU. Obviously, when the last one worked so much and they understand they're going right back to the third floor, why not at least give another shot and just run it back, considering that, everything kind of worked out for you. This isn't going to be the same exact circumstance what we saw in that last round, though. Not nearly as much technology being relied on for the side of UFT. It's just more so kind of playing both neutral pieces if we do see any real tech. The Fenrir being the only real outlier. The Legion, the smoke, the dock, that's something that just can't really be messed around with. But still, regardless, it is more information. It is more drones to work with. It is going to be a counteraction of what is that Valkyrie. You're saying, okay, now we're kind of have one of our own here. We're just at least have something more on site. It's not a Flores, but it's something. It's a presence, and it's a shutdown for something there. So you're only really worried about now Legion. Everybody else, the smoke, sure, going to go ahead and give out a lot when those do go off. But looking here, TMU, they're not really concerned themselves with too much because, again, we're not seeing a mute be presented here. Which is kind of the biggest thing I was curious about, whether that was going to be brought in. Knowing the Iana's in play, knowing the Bravo's in play, those are going to be two big factors of that last push that just can be completely negated, quite frankly, just from putting one thing down, but they don't want to do that.
They do get a first blood in this round, which is nice. Taro knocks down Nash, but as soon as you found one success story, it goes back the other way. Jagorku taking down Nyx and removing the smokes and the toxic babes kind of puts you in a little bit more of a annoying spot, so to say. I'm just more amazed the TMU are able to actually hear anything with their comms when there's a Bravo drone in the background just snacking on chips and having the tinfoily bag make a ton of noises. They have just eaten every single piece of utility that could possibly be available for a defending side. As a Russian comes from Skylight, an interesting attempt. It does end with a TK for Mr. Turbo, and you did see Osprosis try something after the fact, but the Bailiff in the secondary is good enough to try to secure. It's just Mr. Turbo now remaining, apparently having to lie in the bed that they've made for themselves after TKing their teammate. And there's that verticality that we didn't see really utilized last round, and we're seeing be a little bit more prevalent here as they had created holes in new balcony floor to create that concern when the concern was not directly below you, but actually across and below you from that outside balcony door instead.
Was covered by Iana in that last round, keep in mind. So, on the one-dimensional kind of issues we were noticing from TMU, UFT not really being existent too much in that last round, but just more so kind of being obviously flipped on its head, where we're seeing the same exact problems present themselves. But obviously, you've already warranted those mistakes. You've already creating some insurance for yourself. You're one round off from closing this thing out compared to, where there's a lot more mistakes that happen over and over and over again. And especially now that we're seeing the transition go from that third site, where we already kind of saw a lot of issues start to present themselves, especially on the attacking side. Maybe UFT can kind of take some notes from that round on the attacking side and say maybe we can present that same exact kind of thing to them. I know that TMU are just better at noticing what went wrong on behalf of you there and are going to probably diversify themselves in their entries. Make sure to kind of check more corners, work for a little more verticality, and make sure to kind of just clear out that entire sector of the map rather than just kind of keeping their beeline on one singular point of entry. You can already see the ideas come through with the Ram. They're going to go to that second floor. Jackal just playing that protection angle for that to make sure it can get to where it needs to be. Not just bakery. It's there. Let's hit it. So, I mean, they could still mess it up. They could still decide to go through bakery, as weird as it be, but I don't think they're really going to touch that spot, quite frankly. You can already see they're circumnavigating and just kind of pinging that door down, get the idea, and bring attention to that section.
A lot more of a standard approach, I would say, for TMU. They're actually putting players up in the default repel spot, putting Naj up there first and foremost. You've got the I to S for a reason. Knock down those hatches, and then start to use that INOC scanner to see if there are any roamers that have touched the third floor, let alone are still up there. And drones can do most of the dirty work here for TMU. They don't actually have to put a player up on the third floor if they clear out 2 drones at a time. And we're seeing that. They sit 2 in through the hatch, making sure there's nobody watching directly, nobody on the third floor, nobody off towards White Stairs, which I think would be the biggest matter of concern here for TMU. And they'll try to control that space as fast as possible. As UFT have a pretty good foothold, I would say, with the possibility of an extension up to the second floor. Obviously, Naj is here at the top of Red Stairs, already controls this space, but Sleepin's on a stairwell, Doki's on a stairwell, and, well, Sleepin's now sleeping with the fishes because Jagorku gets a very nice shot off the other way, and that even forces Doki away from that red stairwell, which is shocking considering how much of a power point that could have and should have been for the UFT side, as Sergio's a one-and-done deal just the same as we've seen before for a lot of the UFT side, and TMU are back at that man advantage.
You already got players on third floor just inside, chilling, knowing that area of the map is completely clear for them. Players moving on those staircases. Make sure to kind of lock down feet. Make sure anything that's in that area of the map or could be anywhere else off that note is also going to be accounted for to make sure that they're not close, or you kind of take that attendance and make sure the participation is where it needs to be. But even better yet, the entirety of this site, as you can look from this beautiful shot, it is rammed up as all get out. So, I mean, basically this site, once more, you are not only showing all this information to your team and getting access to just everything that's necessary to get a site execute off, but the better thing is you've now, by pure fear, forced all these players of UFT into these corners where you just know if we swing, they got to be here, they got to be there, because out open on site, it's not an option anymore.
Feels like TMU are doing a much better job of creating this phantom pressure, having multiple sidelines into the objective and into the map in the first place, something that I think UFT just didn't do nearly whatsoever. And Taro here is in a big pickle, I would say. Can't necessarily be pressured from main lobby as easily as you would really like to see, but Jagorku's aware of that and just says, hey, I'm not only going to claim this space, I'm going to give the option for Osbrosis to swing in there as well, and Osbrosis takes that space delightfully. So down goes Nick Stocks, just Doki remaining. The 9mm has a huge darn scope now, but is it going to be enough to find all 4? And it will not be the case. A one-and-done deal again as TMU strike first in this series, avenging the loss they faced in week 4. They've already met and equaled their tally they had in that series. Getting the first map is a
requires. They've definitely done it on Cafe, the map pick of UFT. Now we go to their home territory, and with the bans coming through, I think a couple of those adjustments would have helped out UFT in that last map, because what they were lacking was at least kind of information, and better yet, just lacking in the general roam game, as we mentioned. Here, does that allow them kind of in a situation to say, do we want to go for Dokkaebi? Do we want to leave that on the board? Do we need Valkyrie on that defense? Because information was the name of the game, I want to say, at least for that side of the field, and they were just not having it.
Nomad? Taking off Nomad in the air jabs? What a shocking first ban coming out for UFT.
Is common? No? I'm gonna guess no.
Nomad is not that common of a ban for the map of Shalea.
I never see that big of a deal anywhere, quite frankly. I mean, Cafe would have been the place to get her off.
As she could be on this map. And she's still exceptionally strong, but she's not as strong as she could be. That makes me believe that UFT are going to play a very heavy defensive half. They're going to try to get that lead like we saw TMU do in the first half there of Cafe, and they're going to try to replicate that same level of success.
That makes sense.
It's hard to see, but Dokkaebi being the second, that's not shocking. I typically consider Dokkaebi and Flores the top 2 on this side. Maybe Ying as well, because she's so darn powerful on every map, but it seems like especially so on the map of Chalet. Fenrir, Azami. Yes, 2 go-to bans likely to be the choice, but Azami can get squeaked through and be allowed instead to go for the Valkyrie or the Mira of all teams. But they want to go soulless.
Ooh.
Information. You can't tell me you want to go for a roam game, an extension game, and then not go with the information extension game. I'm so confused by what UFT are trying to cook up in the kitchen. But TMU say, we called that ban and we knew the Solus was coming. I think with the success maybe TMU had with Solus, we're realizing it's probably going to be a counter pick and play in some capacity. Maybe that's also why they banned the Nomad. I'm not really too sure. But then they're also joking, we called your Fenrir ban. Yeah, no duh, brother. It's like it's Fenrir on Chalet.
I think even, I mean, UFT just kind of look at it more of a counterplay to kind of shut down TMU. And like the ideas that they had when it came around to the first map. They got a big read of kind of what their stronger operators were looking like. They're just kind of more so trying to slow that capability down. I don't even think that's a concern to them. That's the whole thing, that it feels like UFT is just playing TMU's game, quite frankly, where they were getting annoyed and fed up with the capabilities and what was being pulled off there in Cafe. But it's a totally different map. This is their selection. So they're just playing a different game now, saying, okay, cool, ban what was annoying you in that last map, because we still have all kinds of compositions. We still have all kinds of different places, and better yet, kind of setups that would really lean into what we are playing here. So I think still nothing crazy. I mean, the K makes sense. The Azami now being in play, rather than working against a Fenrir and having to shut down what was going to be those mines, now you can just kind of say, let's get some information of who's on the other side of this wall. It's not as big of a deal. It's not, I'd feel, as tedious, as annoying to deal with. Just in comparison, based on what the ridiculous was that we saw out of TMU in that first map. I mean, usually Solus, you're saying some good info. All right, this is pretty sweet. Fenrir can also do some things. But Azami, in comparison to what happened on that map, you're saying, I'll take that every day of the week.
The big things to note for this map and this round specifically, Dallas, especially when it comes to operator selection to start off the tone of the series, or sorry, the tone of this game, not the series, as that's already happened. A team you set that tone, that's for sure. It's gonna be the Azami being picked up in this first round. It doesn't have as much importance for a lot of compositions when it comes to this basement side, comes to Snowmobile and off towards Winery. The big one's gonna be the Thorn and the Kaid Electro Claws that are being used here by Taro to try to keep them out of Garage. Is that going to be enough? That is going to be an easy one, but the EMP perfectly timed. Nitro Cell gets some, down goes Osmosis. What a sender coming out from Taro. Yes, gets DB and out. Osmosis not able to hit the head enough there, just getting the body in the process, but that puts UFT up now at a man advantage because Taro can be picked back up, and it forces TMU to play a lot more, I would say, egregious elsewhere, and that's going to come off that second floor extension clear, and it debts them the kill. Down goes Sergio on that Thorn. That's a utility that was kind of placed and forget. You aren't too concerned with that loss, but it's going to be a lot more important when you keep in mind that the Ying's been allowed in for TMU, and that Candela, all the utility that's brought in, the so powerful TSLSW, and on top of that, having the smoke canisters will make that outside push in, if they do want to take Snowmobile, which has been opened up, way more fruitful for the team.
Depends on whether or not you actually get that Ying around to circumnavigate and get to this northern entry, or whether or not be that west entry where those staircases are. Because, I mean, obviously, when you come from those main stairs, it's not going to have nearly as much of an influence, because you know that they're going to have that filing cabinet there. You're going to have a lot of coverage and a lot of clutter there that can just kind of go ahead and cover them up to a certain degree, or you can circumnavigate that as a defender. But getting into those spots where you throw it out into the middle of the room, out to that place to where there's not really much you can do, it makes sense to see a different angle being taken. So, Gorku to go somewhere else, play this at a different angle, work off the assistance that is going to be Mr. Turbo there. These kind of garage pushes, while they are very, very dangerous, and you can tell that that electric claw is still there having an effect, it's still worth the trade-off to make sure that you get that entry and you get that space when actually present.
You can see the track stingers from Gridlock being pretty darn effective, I think, for TMU. At least I would view it to be the case. Turbo, who swung in from Snowmobile Stairs, is actually making quick work and getting this plant down behind Shelf. And Jacorko, I mentioned how good the TSW was, and my goodness, does it come to full effect here. I get joked around a lot with Mason, talking about how Chalet's the only map I can play because it's the map I had the most hours on in the entirety of R6. Post rework, because I adore this map. And almost all of them are off the back of playing Ying on the attacking side. She's so darn good. If I can play it, anyone can play it. And TMU are doing it exceptionally well, because Jagorku was able to work in the second floor, get that kill, play in the entry wall they're expecting to do. Realize that's clear because they have proper drone work following in for TMU, which is something we were harping on success-wise, and the map of Cafe that was noticeably absent from UFT on their attacking side. All of that is culminating to this giant point of just putting a pin in the UFT side where they've got to go, ow, that kind of hurts, turn their way, and then they get shot in the back anyways, because TMU have much better control over the entirety of this map, not just the side that you would expect the attack to have, but also the no man's land and even defender control areas that UFT kind of give up too soon.
We're seeing it just kind of unravel here. I mean, TMU, UFT banning things out, saying get rid of that Nomad, better yet get rid of the Soulless, and then TMU saying, all right, appreciate that.
Go for it.
Ying's on the board now. We'll take it. Hey, that's worth the trade. All we got to do is tick them off enough with one person where they just open up the board literally open up the floodgates for a universally just terrible position for them. That's a trade I'll take every day of the week. I mean, I'll go ahead and swap off some Pot of Greed for your Blue Eyes White Dragon. That seems like a great trade. I'll do that.
Pot of Greed.
I mean, it's just like wild to see that TMU are now able to kind of just overwhelm this spot, and even more so considering that they just find themselves such efficient trades after even losing the initial player. You're thinking, okay, the Thermite doesn't really offer too much. Realistically, he did his job, he blew up the door, yippee, go next. But still, you want to have that gun there, you want to have that extra manpower, and knowing that they didn't really need it and still found a successful push in the name breaching spot is just a testament to what this team can accomplish.
Sergio switching over to the Wardens, not that shocking to me. If they're really worried about that Candela, specifically Jagorku, who's, you know, once again clearing out the second floor and hunting for this roamer, you would play the Warden, you play the glasses, you bring out the gamer shades, but now you've got the issue of where is this secondary exit flank going to come from? And the attempt is going to be in from that astronomy side, or sorry, from the solarium side window, where you have to be a little bit more careful on that execute out. You were trying to hold the cutoff angle, and it maybe was set up a little bit too slow for TMU, but doesn't mean that it's an impossibility. Jagorku in a firefight with Sergio will force Sergio downwards, and you get a player inside garage, big garage that is, that's holding a cutoff. That's Nash, who had the right idea, but doesn't see the Capcan traps. It's been swapped out from the Kaid of that last round, and down goes Sergio. There is a cutoff from Osbrosis. A fallback plan has been made, but now TMU are aware there is in fact EDDs. There are going to be explosive devices on these door frames. We just need to kind of figure out where the remainder of them are. That also kind of means we should theoretically have a much easier job getting open that snowmobile garage side. And also, it should be pretty easy to clear out that Kiba barricade that's placed behind snowmobile, and they may not even opt to get rid of it. They could literally just hide behind that and put down the diffuser in that side. But TMU want to make sure they're doing their due diligence, clearing out the second floor, rinsing the players on the first, but they aren't done on the first. Turbo gets caught off guard, and Jagorku, who's already low on HP, has to rely on Osbrosis, who comes up clutch with the kill and puts us in the final 50 seconds in a 2v1.
2 smokes available. Andela's out the rear. I mean, she's got so many of them. But, I mean, regardless, you got to look at the entryway. What you're going to be taking here. You already see that corner window being blown out. You see the patch now kind of coming into play here, but that is just nothing but a distraction. You're looking to go ahead, alleviate the detention, find yourself the entry. There is one player here, but guess what? There's 2 sites, and that makes it an utter nightmare for Sleepy to kind of hold things down, make sure to get this cross, and just really play the denial game, considering that you are nothing but a well mine. Sure, while it's great for the entry, if they're not actually going for you, well, it's not that big of a deal.
Where's Osbrosis going to rotate to? Oh, they're going to go through drop. Will they get spotted? They do. That gives the information to Jagorku, but Sleepin's already low. It's 4 seconds left. Do you push for this kill? You kind of feel you have to, but no. The plant will go down. That gives them plenty of time to rush forward. It's an easy cleanup for Sleepin, and the 2v1 comes to a high fruitful effect because the split up is made there. I'm not sure why they opt to split so much. If Osbrosis is going to drop in through that hatch, you would typically wait until Jagorku is at least started to get the plant down the other way and times become an issue. You can also just hold that door to watch that sightline in the first place, or drone it or something. I'm not sure if there was any drones still remaining at that point in time for either of the 2 players to opt to utilize at that moment, but a missed call for TMU, and UFT are going to rightfully so capitalize off a big mistake and tie this series, or this game up, I should say, 1-1, and no longer be allowed to step down into the basement and hopefully find the same level of success they just did last round up in Master Bedroom and Office, which personally, as I harp on it every weekend and every Tuesday here for the NECC, I do not like this objective for Chalet. You should probably go kitchen and dining instead.
What does God have against this side? I guess
it's the same defense. You play kitchen and dining as if you're playing the second floor on Cafe. I talked about it on Cafe. You don't play this objective as it is because it's too easy to take control of that space, and you're already gonna have to play the first floor the same way you play this objective. You have to play it the same way. You have to extend up topwards to keep that verticality offline. So why not play the safer way, where you can play the verticality and then fall back to the first floor where it's safer? Just why? Especially when bar is also an option still available right here, which is so darn good on the map of Chalet.
I was going to make a point, but it really just kind of nails your thing in. As an attacker, I always love this site. And I think that's kind of it. It's because you're like, there's a big door there?
He likes this site, then that probably means bad things.
Exactly, yeah.
It's
just like, honestly, it's usually because I bring the Flores here. I mean, you go ahead, run it through that door, it blows everything up, and usually see a lot of denial utility go in there, just kind of cut that thing off. But one drone and bye-bye, literally everything in a 3-mile radius. But already going ahead, getting things covered off here. You see that UFT have gotten themselves in a little bit of a bad spot, losing the initial player. The Warden, of all guys, you're not really too stressed about. I mean, I think it's one of the better players to kind of get off the board. But obviously, when you see that, well, the Malusi in play, the Valkyrie's still about. The Izami and the Legion are your two real big threats. They're the ones we kind of roaming around the map or playing that defensive stance and actually actively having a stance inside this round, because the longer they live, the more of a presence they create for themselves.
Gorku's teasing the possibility of a Candela. The track stingers from actually start to do their dirty work, just step by step, making sure there is no more roam game that can go through silently for UFT, which is obviously a concern. They know that Nyx was out roaming, and they know that Surtur was also separated slightly, and you're gonna have to be concerned about Taro's possibility on the extension for the Legion as well. It's just little things that could be an ever-present threat to them, and they're doing a very good job of isolating all of those potential possibilities and ensuring that they aren't going to be in the timeline that gets, you know, Doctor Strange through to take down Thanos. You need to make sure every timeline matches to what the result you want, and TMU have to do that themselves. Can't just rely on a magic time, you know, stone to do so. And, you know, losing a first blood for UFT spells a pretty poor way to do so. And while we do see Doki get this kill on a run out, they pay the price for it, with a Claymore going the other way. Is it a good cleanup for Sleepin'? Yes, it will be. The runouts for UFT have actually now netted them 2 kills and an even frag to put them up. As this could have been gorgeous for actually, but somehow survives the player in bathroom, but can't survive the one in closet, putting this to an even 2-on-2 again.
Or I mean, even no real presence kind of put on site just yet, or even inside the map, because already Turbo still repelling, still looking towards that outside area, and even the more so, you do see still those 2 drones remaining on that Zofia that can kind of get those placements, get those drone placements, I mean, give you the information to let you know when an execute can be made. But you got to think about what's available to you. And Ace, Zofia, you got a lot to work with here. You're still not really concerned with who's going to be on site because, well, you picked off enough players where you're putting in a 1vx scenario. You're worried about now about the Valkyrie. That's going to be probably somewhere else, maybe on that bottom floor waiting for a diffusal to go off. A Nitro cell from your feet, but still, the wild card is that, well, when you're in a 1vx situation, that's not really a possibility, because you got to defend the site. You got to put your boots down on the ground, and you got to make sure to be there to play.
That could have been a death for Nyx. Player putting down the Legion mine, and there's the defensive round win. You just play time there. TMU just
played.
I don't think they realized what was going on here. The Legion mine had also just bought enough time. The Goo mine had bought enough time. They were forced to rip that out of their own ankle and couldn't get to the position they wanted. You know you're in a 2v1. You just spotted the player. You know where they're going to come from, and you know that that bathroom wall is already breached open to a large part. I just feel like a big misplay for TMU puts UFT on top, and that was exactly what I said going into that second half. TMU only had to rely on Cafe that second half for a couple of mistakes. 2 mistakes max for UFT, 2 big mistakes. And now we're seeing UFT say, TMU's making mistakes too. Gods can bleed. They dominated us on Cafe, but we're now showing that we can and will beat them on Chalet if they continue to have these big mistakes go our way. Failure to clear out game, failure to step into open space, and big time problems in major 2v1 scenarios. Now 2 rounds in a row to give UFT the win. We said clutch rounds weren't enough to make it a favorable game for Cafe despite the scoreline. We're now seeing clutch rounds go the opposite way for TMU, who just can't win in seemingly favorable spots.
And it was another one of those kind of denial positions, all things granted. I mean, it was the same exact thing what we saw in Cafe. It was instead of 1v2, it was being a 1v3. Playing the timer, you're on the defense, you're just kind of running away and stalling that out. But even then more so, we're seeing at least a little more initiative out of TMU. Actually getting that defusal down over and over again, at least going for it. And sure, while it's always delayed a little more than what would be favorable, it's at least going down. The idea and the execution, the presence on site is there. We haven't seen UFT on this map just yet on the attacking side to see where they're going to meet that, but their defense is at least there enough to create that presence, to create that intimidation factor, and to create that fear that gives you that space to actually get things going. But Look at the map right now. There's not much of an actual presence across the entire map. It is all within a singular corner for one team, and in the other side for another, where it almost looks like there's a line of scrimmage set up here.
Big trust, I would say, to not cross that line, and at the same time, you have to cross the line, right? It's a must-case scenario for TMU to now get to the finish line a little bit more quicker, I would say. And the Osa shields is what they're attempting to do so with. If you can put down these shields successfully on Mezzanine and get the breach open and not have the breach also destroy the shield, which is kind of a big concern for a lot of people, you can set up a really solid foothold on that Mezzanine side, and that's going to be the bigger problem here. So Sergio just standing in the middle of piano, downs Jagorku, finishes them off, and yeah, you've got that Mezzanine control, but you've lost control theoretically everywhere else. As Sergio, the 9v19, downs yet another player actually, and puts this into a 4 versus 3 off that refrag, and TMU lacking the Osa for a second shield to work with, and the track stingers, meaning that UFT could take this man advantage, forego that advantage on site, and send one player wrapping around.
The Flores drone on the exact wall where you just basically killed somebody is kind of funny, considering that that's where we just saw Sergio, and they're like, let's just make sure nobody's around here. But it's just because there may be a looming player nearby. Taking the exact same spot, a little surprising, a little bit not ideal if we're kind of talking about it, but even then you gotta look at the rest of the team and what they're exactly going to be doing in terms of exchange. Understanding that, I mean, that kill on Sergio gives you enough info to know that somebody is going to be living around these second floors, and while that's a given, where is it coming from? You had that wall already accounted for. Sleep is going ahead and checking up on that. Meanwhile, you got NECC over towards the other side of the map, playing towards that north end, where everybody's trying to go ahead and kind of close in on the second floor, but you don't have the utility to retake it. So you're just holding on, praying that your presence enough is to at least kind of alleviate and just kind of draw out that timer.
Where is the denial here for Turbo? All of this was set up to keep an impact off of taking out this last exothermic charge, and with that gone, you're now sitting in a spot where you have no ability to breach into dining. You have to ego swing every single corner, and the ego swings just aren't working out. You lose your one up inside of office. That means that player's still up there, can hide up there for the remainder of this round, and essentially make this already nearly impossible scenario just exactly so. As Doki isolates one, can't finish the job. Down to 8 seconds though, red time ticking. No chance that we see TMU pick up 3 kills in this moment, because you still have players up on that second floor. And with Nyx's wraparound in through Trophy Stairwell, trying to work down that elbow and worm their way in for a kill, they do so, and it's just TMU just getting outplayed, truly speaking. That's why dining is so darn dominant. If you can hold a player in office because you play for the extension up on the second floor, like I've said, very little things can stop you from taking down that utility. And we saw it even from so far back. An impact from distance gets rid of that exothermic charge, and they have nothing left because they had to use one on Mezzanine already. That's why you bring 2 hard breachers. And don't let them die would be the other thing, you know?
Even then, I mean, to start off the round, you were given a very deep breath relief to start things out with there with Sergio. I mean, 2 kills off the back of that Azami. Still, not, I mean, obviously you don't really have all the walls present on that site, but I mean, still just going ahead and making sure to bring that attention to piano off of that office for a second, create the opening where you know that you got NECC over towards the north side. You got this, or you got the mute playing inside that office where everything's kind of lining up for you. As you mentioned, it comes under the ego swings at that point, and making sure to diminish those numbers to a degree where you can't even take favorable fights there anymore just because of the player allocation that's on that floor alone. You've already set the entire map to be into your favor. Whether you play for numbers, obviously you want to go 1 for 1, but going 2 for 1, and even then in a separated instance of the map that isn't even on the objective, that's even more important just because you're not putting nearly as many players there. So, well played there. I mean, obviously, UFT, their defense is going to look much, much better. I think the big part of Cafe was them starting off on a bad foot on that attacking end. His defense always feels much more easy. It always feels a little more comfortable. You're given that space. You understand where your line is drawn, and you just kind of work with it compared to creating it and pushing it and taking control with that and shifting it over the course of a round. That TMU, to at least get one early on, shows that they're up to the task, but can they consistently do it over and over again? Because they need at least a second here, I'd say.
Consistency is key, right? And for UFT, they've pretty much shown they could do it at any objective. All 3 that they would necessarily be hitting. It's just a matter of can TMU change the pace. And I think this is a great way to change up the pace. Jagorku's off of the Ying, off of the Osa we saw fail in the round prior, and now over towards the Ram, which is less impactful, I would say, as a piece of utility in comparison to what we're used to seeing for a map like this. Its biggest piece of utility usage is going to be inside a Fireplace Hall. where you would typically consider, or sorry, yeah, fireplace. You could use a no, not a cap can, a fuse, a cluster charge, the old SI 2023 strategy to use cluster charges, break down the floorboards here, and create sight lines from there. But Ram can now do all of that with a single piece of the kit and have a very solid gun to work with flashes in the back pocket. Arguably better, a lot more useful here in terms of total sightline creation, as UFT don't have the safe space to extend away from sight and now have to sit a lot more close, like here inside Blue Hall. Why are Taro and NECC so darn close? Because the roof is made of lava and there's no safe angle to really hide behind.
You're not facing a rogue Mick here when it comes around to this ground floor. These guys can shoot through rafters. They can get kills very efficiently, and even more so when you get the Ram brought out. You know that obviously those floorboards is just as good as a clean line of sight. So considering already that you're opening up that main area, that corner is not up, and the rotation is what becomes an absolute utter nightmare for UFT on the defensive end, and you're already going ahead and just closing it off. The Think is playing a supportive role from the entire singular map. You see already the kills coming in, being pinched, and Nash is the one just is running through everybody. Saying, I can take these fights. Wow. What sacrifice do I have to make? I can die in the meantime. We get so many players of a surplus that we can go in one by one. Just don't go too crazy. There's still an objective, and you still got to at least have some much of a better idea. As that is going down, there is the protection present, and you do have enough of a pinch to make sure that it does not get disrupted.
This is where you see TMU finally say, okay, maybe Blue Hall isn't the end-all be-all for our success in this basement side. It worked once, it's not going to work twice, right? We need to play a lot smarter, and I think extending in with the free control they've been given by UFT now twice when it comes to basement towards Big Garage, even in rounds where it wasn't basement and where it was kitchen and dining and Big Garage was taken from TMU, there wasn't much contention coming out from UFT. TMU using that as a majority of a way to get control. They take control of Boiler, they get the exothermic charge planted on that wall, even if it doesn't eventually become the biggest use case for them because the mirror window gets broken and you lose your retreating thermite of osmosis on the attempted runaway. It doesn't matter. They did their dirty work. They got that sight lane open and they created the pressure saying, hey, there's absolutely 100% a player here. And that's enough information to say we can just go from here and find where we need to after the fact. And those roof holes from inside Fireplace Hall as well for TMU. They knew the step-by-step plan. And they said, we just need to use these to our advantage. UFT will eventually step back into these sight lines because they're going to feel the pressure off towards Big Garage. And that's your step. That's your backup plan to your backup plan, right? If the first one doesn't work, you've got a second, you've got a third, and that shows depth of strategy, which is so darn important in R6, especially when your main strategy probably won't work when you're down to 3 players, probably won't work when you're down to even 4 sometimes, depending on the operator that gets knocked off the board. So we now head into the very possible round of this half. 3-3 is a scoreline team you're going to pray for. They've got to do it themselves. And this could still be a 4-2 split for UFT if they take this Master Benjamin off his side the same way they did last time, where it came down to a 2v1 and they clutched it up.
We're just sitting with 32 on the scoreboard. You know that, I mean, obviously there's some actual executions that worked out here for TMU. That was really the biggest thing that we're looking at, is always taking it from the underdog's perspective, because the one up top isn't really struggling too much. You got to kind of obviously do the same thing as they would do in a practice. Analyze what goes wrong. Figure out how you're going to get yourself back in this thing. Figure out what exactly these holes are to make sure this thing gets right back to an even standpoint. So considering that already we are seeing a little bit of a holes being exposed by UFT, a little bit more presence towards that site, playing from underneath, and more so just kind of working on these outer angles, it really opens things up to where when you hear anything at all, you're going to start to panic. You're going to make sure to get that rotation in as quickly as possible when you understand that, oh, we're a little bit too far out, and, well, that's when the cutoff occurs.
Perfect way for TMU to use speed early again to catch a player off guard for UFT. Sleeping, caught sleeping. Just trying to work in from that kitchen wall. TMU, who claimed that space pretty darn effectively, now need to do the exact same thing when it comes to mezzanine. And Doki, where you would typically expect maybe a shield to be here to help with that extension upwards, there's nothing. They have to play this very dry, very simplistic. And TMU are using that as a great way to use the skeleton key from below, tear down the floorboards, make it so Doki can't sit still and force them to even fall back towards library. We see right now where you can step into box, but you're going to have to use it like a fighting ring instead, where Jagorko, I think, is totally aware of this player's average position, just needs the drones to step forward ever so slightly, and they were waiting in the perfect timing for it, as TMU have picked apart UFT's defense. Only 2 now remaining, and Taro's down to 1 HP. Can they get it? It's a free frag for Nash. A single bullet could have done so, and Sergio's got a huge hill they have to climb now. 4 players they need to remove all by their lonesome. Just 3 more remaining after taking down Nash, sorry, on that rappel. But there's 45 seconds, and players in your face. It's Jigorku hunting for their third of the round.
To that point, I mean, to where the clearance is there, capitalization is there, the presence is there, especially on the attacking side when every single checkbox is marked. Quite frankly, you already won that gunfight. The only thing it really comes down to is hitting the shot, and when it's served to you on a silver platter, the only way you mess that up is if you're not hungry, and you just don't even go for it in the first place. I mean, and already we saw Doki take every single one of those steps. Just go ahead, open up a corner of the map, understand that the fight isn't going to be taken anywhere else. It's going to be coming to me eventually, and the rest of my team should just literally have free real estate to work with in the meantime. So, well played there. Obviously, first blood's helping every single circumstance, and I mean, that just can't be given up in any means whatsoever. But the big thing here is going to be TMU just finding these initial picks, finding these initial ways to open up the map, and finding these initial holes so that not only do they really create off the back of these deaths, but that they just capitalize off of, knowing that, okay, this guy's checked off the list. What does their default look like? Where is their presence? Where does he usually kind of fit into this big system, this big machine? And where does his gear usually sit in that system? But already, now being on the defensive end, it's a little bit different. This was the half that they really turned things up when it came right to Cafe. So this is where you're expecting for them to just kind of kick into high gear. Obviously, a slow start when it came around to the attacking side, but now where it kind of feels like they had themselves in a home turf situation, not only in the map, but on the side from what we saw in Cafe. And they're already feeling themselves. Oh, UFT have to start this off with a win, or I think it's just kind of done for.
Yeah, it's been 10 rounds since TMU, though, have played defensive on any map. Obviously, they started the first half of Cafe that way, so you maybe have a fear of that. But look what we see going on here. All 5 for UFT are going to step in directly. They want to take the objective as fast as possible.
The same spot.
Osprosis, though, just does not give a single regard for what you want to think. Sleeping even says LOL. Like, that was an attempt from UFT, and that's about as much as you can phrase it. Osprosis says, enough with this. Turbo says, yeah, I'm in it as well, guys. Don't worry. 3 players as quick as can be off the board, and Nash makes it 4. Just Doki left. And you would need the real Doki to step up to this level of skill needed to remove all 5 players. They've done the at least one of onto Nash, denying the possibility of a flawless, but Turbo swings just as decisively down the stairwell, and it is a rinsed round for TMU. You said they needed to start off strong, and they start off as strong as humanly possible, and that was just a bad call out for UFT.
Was it? I mean, when you said all 5 players, immediately, if I hear all 5 players and we're talking about an entry, those next words better be coming from different angles. Because
that's the thing, it's the same problem UFT had on Cafe. They're all coming from the same door.
Thank you. Same exact door funneling in. If I can
it's bakery all over again.
If I can put a 0 up with my middle finger and my thumb over my computer monitor and see all 5 players within that exact circumference, there's something bigger at hand here that needs to be addressed. And even then, TMU are making the calls as well. Lily typing in all chat, who is calling these pushes? This has now been the 5th round that you have done this over the course of the entire series. Split it up. Take it from different angles. Take this attacking side as the way you were intended to be. You have made it this far into playoffs, and I mean, while sure I haven't been here, I mean, their defense must have been godlike, because if this is your attacking side, you're playing Call of Duty, and that just will not cut it here. The 1.5 does not exist anymore.
It's a lot harder to play guns up, especially in the current patch. First off, you said, like you said, the 1.5, which is the perfect match of great sight reticle, great sight in the first place, and magnification. No longer being available makes it a lot harder to run and gun, and it's just harder to run and gun. Not only does it take more time to ADS than it did prior, but if you're running and try to ADS, it's even slower to try to do so. And UFT, yeah, the shield change came through. You hide your knees a little bit more, but Osprosis does not care about your puny shield. They'll shoot through it anyways and give you that first blood and really just kind of set the tempo and tone. Here's Sergio in a firefight with Jigorku. Exactly what you need to see. Get that man advantage and now fall back. Perfect. Don't play the fight. You don't have to give them the good fight that early. Fall back And it now even nets a second kill as Turbo goes down to the hands of NECC. And your 2 entries have now found the biggest, most important pieces of success now on this attacking side.
You got Toki alive. Your Bucks there in play. Problem is they're entering in the 3rd floor when second isn't completely clear. And when you know these kind of lineups, you're obviously going to run into difficulties to where the numbers now aren't really playing in your favor anymore. Which on the attacking side of the map, obviously, is a little more difficult. Considering that, well, on the defense, you're still just working around that site. You still know what's available to you. You still know what sight lines are there. Better yet, you know where they aren't in that site. That's the most important thing. They're still working around. They're still circumnavigating. And you still have 2 players that are looking really comfortable on that 3rd floor. You know that UFT does not have the control that they need right now. And better yet, from our perspective, we know they're not even really inside.
Down goes Taro. The Thorn SMG at this range is deadly as can be. Other than in now, the 9mm, and Haj, you got a deadly force to be reckoned with a scope that far. You can hold off that mezzanine big window, that balcony big window for as long as humanly possible. Is there a drone available for UFT to try to utilize here to ensure there's nobody on this stairwell? I don't think that's the case, and having the gun barrel be ever so slightly spotted is giving and singing information to TMU to say, hey, there is somebody here. They want to take off his side, and we're hearing the skeleton key off inside Ivy Hall. We know where these 2 players are. There's a guarantor, and once Sleepin extends in, because they're gonna feel the pressure to do so, now it's on Doki's shoulders. What a flick down, actually. But still 30 seconds left to have to do so much more, and yeah, that CZ is not gonna be that CZ is not gonna miss at this distance. A slight pixel through, and you've got another flick of a lifetime to put TMU up now 2 rounds in a row, heading into round 9, where they have to have a timeout. If you're UFT, you have to be able to talk. It looks like a tech timeout because the player DC, but a timeout's a timeout. You gotta talk.
Yeah, still a discussion nonetheless, which is definitely required at this point in the game. I mean, you're not sitting at that threshold just yet to where the game's over, but still at that threshold where you're saying, regardless if you're looking at map point or looking at be over with, anything leading up to that is worth just a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of a discussion to figure out what exactly is going on. And quite frankly, we had some good flashes of what UFT could accomplish on the attacking side in that last round. I love the start. They had 5-3. You're thinking, best case scenario. It's like we're seeing a different team. And then, because you gave it up, you back up, look to kind of rendezvous with the rest of your team, and you're saying, all right, guys, I got inside. I found my kill. Now I want to work with y'all. Where are we? Oh, we're still outside. What? What were y'all doing? It's that point to where I would have been better off where I was playing, where we then kind of worked together to play as a unit to make sure to carry that influence through the map. And you can get up to the ground floor. That's great and all, but the problem is the 3rd floor still presides. It is still there. It is still lingering. You have a lot more players sitting there working the verticality from top to bottom than, you know, bottom to top. So already knocking those guys out, it looks good, but you just didn't find nearly the assistance. You didn't find nearly the angles you needed to there. You didn't put nearly the pressure that was required to take that 3rd floor with the numbers that you have.
I'll point out as well that it seems like so much of UFT's success off their entries, their Zofia and their Ashe in that last round, is coming off of isolated kills. TMU had 2 extenders. That's the 2 players who go down. But note that when TMU have their players static on site and holding these, what I would widely consider to be default defensive positions, your static defensive positions, they're failing and falling apart. And I'm not sure where the difference is coming from, because UFT taking those angles, they're 50-50s. Jagorko is trapped inside big garage there, has to escape in through hall, has to work in from boiler side, where you have control there if you're NECC and holding that cutoff. Yeah. That should be an easy kill. There's no way out. There's nowhere else but there. You can get Jagorko. That's not a problem. Secondary one, you're dealing with Turbo. Turbo is kind of slightly out of place. That's a frag you'll take any day of the week. What about everything else? Where's the angle you're coming from? Where's big window control on that sight line to now? Where is a player trying to take Ivy early and then swing out with flashes through a corner and have ego window be in check? I just feel like there's so much prep that UFT forget about when they start to get these early kills, when they start to get these first bloods. Because we saw UFT, honestly, which is kind of shocking considering their Zoltan Cafe, they won, I think, first blood about 40% of the time, which is a pretty good statistic, and still somehow made nothing of that at the end of it by only getting 3 rounds total the entire game. And it's looking like the same thing's kind of happening here. They're getting first bloods. They're finding these kills. I just don't think they're making the impact afterwards because TMU are winning 50-50 gunfights when they shouldn't be 50-50 gunfights. They should be 80-20 gunfights because you've sent out utility, you've flashed, you've dumped your positions, you know where they are because you have drones. They should be going in UFT's favor, and yet they're still 50-50s. And I'm sorry to break it to you, TMU are gunning you down. It is more like 30-70s because they are just showing that they could be better fraggers right now.
If they're gunning you down, what's the worst thing you want to be playing? TDM. And it feels like that's kind of what, quite frankly, UFT's buying into. Where they either set that line of scrimmage where the spawns are and then just kind of go all in one, and at that point you are literally fishing a barrel. But here, when you spread things out, you're kind of working more to find these frags. You got to set things up, you lose sight of the objective. And I think that's the big problem that's really just tearing them up here, is understanding that we got to have one cohesive objective here. We got to have one synonymous idea that we really start to kind of close off on. And, well, they get closed off and shut off, better yet, one by one, from these picks in the process just to get anything done.
Look at the strategy from TMU. They just send Jagorko off to excuse me, this just piss him off. He's like a bee. Yeah. You just sting him every once in a while and then fly away, just buzz elsewhere. It's perfect. It's exactly what you're asking for. And eventually when they do get dealt with, look how much damage has already been dealt back in return. Jagorko only gets 1 kill, it's fine. Jagorko gets 2 like they did. You're a giant nuisance and you've done the dirty work. I noticed that Jagorko realizes that and falls back. Their initial plan was to get their 1 kill and retreat, but they saw the second be an option. They saw Taro and said, this is doable for me, and they go for it. And then when UFT realized, hey, Jagorko may still be inside Cubby, maybe they're in library, we got to extend into Ivy Hall. That's where Nash swings out of the Ivy Hall hole that they've created inside Softwall and get another kill. Escalating opportunities that UFT are like tunnel visioning in on, and TMU are playing into that really well, which is shocking because how do you expect that from a team? Well, you expect it because UFT have done it the entire series and we've not seen them change up that strategy. Variation is king in R6. You can change your operator every round. You can't do that in other esports, right? You can't change your agent in the middle of a round in Valorant. You can't change your champion in League of Legends, right? None of these are possible. You can smoke that you're dead now, apparently. But part of that aside, which is crazy. Imagine if you could throw a smoke canister as thermite after you're dead, or put down an exothermic charge after you're dead. It doesn't matter because TMU, they're playing into something that shouldn't be possible, and UFT, I just think they don't realize that. It's got to get fixed, and the round result is very indicative of the success that was found so darn early from TMU, now putting them at match and series point, looking like a very well possible 7-3 again, back-to-back on maps.
They set up, they either find themselves starting really good, really healthy, and then it just slows down, or it just seems like they're hemorrhaging, and right off the get-go, they just don't look healthy off the get-go, and they just kind of slow down more and more as the round progresses. And no matter what, it feels like on either end of the spectrum that you're looking at this from, the problem still resides. You get these late round situations where you actually have to put your eyes on the site. UFT are either lacking players, lacking resources, which obviously will also count as players, or they're just lacking an idea, lacking a sense of objective there. And at that point, TMU, they have so much stuff to work with. They haven't really been stressed or even kind of strewn in by that point. They can just say, let's throw players at them. It's a 1-bullet game. They're already down numbers more than likely at this point. And as you said, just kind of throw players at them, just kind of create that fear factor. It's a 1-bullet game, and whenever they're isolated, still trying to pinch a site in a 1-to-1 kind of perspective, it's just not going to work out for them. And over again, we see it to where that stresses the entirety of UFT out, where you got 3 guys where they can't even look at drones, quite frankly. It feels like they're not getting even the recon necessary to find these setups or swing off of each other, or the only thing they want to work with is their eyes. And it goes right back to that TDM mentality that just is not working out for them.
You know, a piece of plastic, you'll bend it over and over and over again, and eventually the micro tears in it will break and it starts to turn white and then it'll snap. I feel like that's what UFT are doing. Their ego swinging a lot of these corners, and they survive the first, they survive the second, but eventually the plastic's gonna break, it's gonna wear thin, and it's gonna snap. And it's bearing all of your weight right there. TMU are playing a very good defensive game, very smart. They're letting Jagorko just kind of be out there. They're letting the extenders just kind of play. And I think that's a very smart strategy for certain teams, and it's not for others, but it's working really well for TMU strength, and it's working, I would say, almost more specifically really well for UFT's weaknesses here. As a first blood will be gained in favor for UFT. NECC goes super hyper aggressive to take down Jagorko. And it's exactly what you want to ask for, to remove the 11-7 now player off the board. But as soon as you find that success, where's Nash? on the fireplace stairwell, holding both sides of both the fireplace main entrance and snowmobile garage to refrag that back and tie this game into a 4v4 again.
And is that exact player too? It's not somebody else. It's not another expose. It is that exact player where you know it's coming from. There's no variation. There's no adaptation off the back of something. It's saying, I killed this initial player, so the rest of the map will open itself up, right? It's just not how this works. But they have made sure to kind of at least make it work to some degree, because while that was happening in that certain sector of the map, we do see a lap around, a circumnavigation coming through for the rest of UFT, and they have found themselves at least eyes on the objective, which is something I feel like they have not done the entire game, especially considering there is 1 minute 15 remaining on the clock. The last time they saw an objective was like round number 3 back on the last map at 6 seconds.
Turbo gets a wild swing out through into Ivy and takes down Doki. Osprosis, who's already low, will have a firefight here with a crouching Taro behind bar. Flash is perfectly thrown, and Osprosis had a chance there. Won't matter at the end of it. Sergio had the covering fire, and Sleep, and even turns to take down Turbo on the push. It's just actually remaining. Player up inside of Hatch, up in Library, and now you go around 1. The attacking side here. You gotta pray that you can do it, and if you can, you got to do it at least well. And UFT make sure that, yep, they can give up first blood. They can get first blood. They can give up a refrag afterwards, but then you know where Nash is. Get me once, shame on me. Get me twice. Well, shame on me. I should really be doing better at that point. 6-4 our score, and TMU still 1 round away from ending this series and ending the playoffs here for UFT in the NECC.
Then still making a little bit of adjustments, understanding that these sites will be rotating somewhere else. And I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, just small little things here and there. Ash, Zofia, still relatively kind of required here from this team, which makes complete sense. I mean, going ahead, opening up this map, looking to kind of close things off, looking for some more aggressive utility that just can't really be counteracted, and even then can't really be detected too much until it's too late. That's a big thing that's going to play into their favor here. But even then, it comes down to getting close enough where that element of surprise can actually take effect. And that's something that they're going to have to make sure to really kind of work on here. If places work out to start things off, that's going to work well for them. But if they don't find themselves in a strong start, everything following is going to be really bad, just because they're not going to find that setup. They're not going to get themselves to that point. And their game plan just doesn't really look malleable to any degree. So making some exchanges here, going from the Hibana to the Finca, like that there, the Capital to the Buck. Once again, I still feel like it's a little bit of kind of a brawler comp right there in that TDM mindset, but it worked in the last one. You can find a way to make it work here.
I have a lot of times now when we cast together, I'll get a DM afterwards saying as it feels like we have good chemistry. I don't think our chemistry matters right now. It's the chemistry between Naj and Jagorku. They have been so consistently a wombo combo 1-2 punch that you can tell when casters have good chemistry. You see all the time in Pro League. You can see when friends have good chemistry playing games together. It's just a Naj and Jagorku power show right now, and it's unbelievably successful, as actually is holding on their own. A big run-in from bathroom window. It doesn't really pan out for UFT the way they wanted, and down go 2 more. Nash and Turbo lock in the actual piano side. It's just a split rush in for UFT. This didn't work in round 7. Why would it work in this round? You're already looking down the barrel end of a rifle when you're at match points. It's Turbo to send us out of Chalet, my favorite map, and it didn't show me a lot here from UFT. But they at least got 1 more than they did previously. GG no read TMU. They'll move on in the playoffs. And Chalet is over. And the NECC hopes for UTM are over as well.
Feels like not enough resistance coming out here from UTM. I mean, considering what this game was supposed to present to us, seeing the results of